This episode is brought to you by the Pelora Group.
Welcome back to Winning Through Culture.
I'm Tim Flanagan.
And I'm Amanda Kramer.
When culture's not a priority, people aren't a priority. Having an intentional focus helps you as a leader remain impactful and relevant as you move your business forward.
Welcome to Winning Through Culture. Well, welcome back to another episode of Winning Through Culture. Tim and I are really excited today because we have a guest from the introduction that we had at the Purpose Summit. So Tim Kelley is joining us, and he is a global expert on purpose. And if you've been listening along, you know we love to talk about how you create a purpose that resonates and is truly impactful for whatever business you are looking to put into the world and have a product out there that really supports not only leaders and organizations, but ultimately answers the question of what is your true calling. So he has trained over 1,000 consultants and therapists and coaches, and he is an author and a co-author of 3 best-selling books. He's worked with top executives and government leaders and even presidential candidates, which I found very interesting, and has the opportunity to really lean into his MIT days because he did graduate with a degree in mathematics. So I know he'll lean into that. There is a science behind all of this as well. So Tim, thank you for being with us. We're really excited for the conversation.
Oh, delighted to be here. And happy International Podcasting Day.
That's right. It is International Podcasting Day, which is a fun fact we all learned together, which I love.
I can't take credit. The other Tim.
The other Tim gets credit for that. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't make it up either.
Yeah. Well, I think today's conversation is definitely going to lean into bringing a unique blend of like strategy and leadership all around this topic of purpose. And so if we're leaning into really starting out, you've worked with a lot of different organizations across various enterprises. Like, what is that one question that everybody asks you when it comes to creating or building a purpose statement?
Well, the thing that keeps coming up is often the people who are the best candidates for hiring me to help them with their purpose are ones who've already tried repeatedly and failed. And what happens is people get together in a boardroom or something and they say, okay, all right, this purpose thing sounds great. You know, we read this book, we went to this conference, we're going to create a purpose statement now. And then they start writing stuff on the whiteboard and they pretty quickly discover that it's not that easy to come up with something really compelling. And I've had companies that have tried to do this for months or years. And so then they're like, what are we doing wrong? How do we actually come up with something that's worthy of putting on our website or doing anything? We're embarrassed to show the results of our work to our employees. Or they'll sort of try to put lipstick on the pig and say, hey, we have a great new purpose statement. Here it is. Ta-da! Even though they know it's not anything to write home about. So that's really the thing. When people are interested in it, they quickly discover how hard it is. And the question is, how? Because we see this company has one and they have one and they have one. How come we can't get one?
Yeah. Well, and I think as people are starting that process, or like you said, they created one already or they've kind of failed along the way, I think there's power in knowing what doesn't work. So what are some of the questions that you help them work through to get to one that is impactful or does resonate or creates or elicits a reaction when it's said or written on the wall or however they're going to distribute what a purpose statement might be for a company?
Yeah. So there's 2 different key issues. One is, where do we get the raw purpose information from? Because it turns out that sitting down, so if you ever tried to, you guys have probably done some marketing in your time, right? If you're trying to write marketing copy or something, sitting down and say, I'm going to write some awesome marketing copy right now is a good way to get writer's block.
Very true.
Right. I'm going to create something.
I'm going to write it here.
Creative and pithy and fantastic, and everyone's going to love it. Here I go. Right. It actually works better to have more low quality raw materials, right? Because if you try to make a small amount of very high quality raw materials, that's extraordinarily difficult. This is why people do brainstorms, right? But the question is, where are we going to get that raw materials? Where are we going to get that information from that we will then turn into purpose statements? That's the one issue. And the other is, how do we tell a good purpose statement from a bad purpose statement? Which is not as obvious as you might think it is, right? People imagine that if you had 2 purpose statements, they could tell, oh, this is the good one, this is the bad one. Not so.
Yeah.
So those are the two key issues. Where do we get the data from that we're going to use to create the purpose statements? And once we have that data, how do we tell the good data from the bad data?
So where do you get the data, Tim?
Funny you should ask.
Well, I think to your earlier point, the interesting thing is people read a book, or hear a podcast, and they're like, oh, yeah, we should have one of these too. And I don't know that data is the first thing that comes into their mind as a way to inform them. It's more, what did other people do? Maybe we should do that too.
Right. And unfortunately, a lot of the best known stories are stories about how like someone hit their head in the shower and came up with a great purpose statement, or they had a dream or something like that. That's very hard to replicate. One of the best stories I know is a guy, and this was a personal purpose statement, but he got his purpose statement because he got in a car accident, had an out-of-body experience, and the Dead Relatives Committee gave him his purpose and sent him back.
Wow.
How are you going to replicate that, right? You're going to drive into a telephone pole? Hopefully not, right?
Hopefully you don't replicate.
So some of the best stories are things you should not try at home. And so there's basically two ways of going about it. If you ask, so NLP practitioners, neuro-linguistic programming people, are trained not to ask their clients why questions. A good NLP practitioner will never start a question with the word why. And the reason is because why questions cause vapor lock in the brain. It's that they do bad things to your cerebral cortex. And so the problem is that purpose is fundamentally a why question. So any question about purpose automatically locks up the brain right away. And so there's basically roughly two ways of going about it. The way nearly everybody does it is they ask what I call purpose-adjacent questions. And a purpose-adjacent question isn't a question directly about the purpose, it's a question indirectly about the purpose. For example, and this is about personal purpose, what would you do if you had a year to live? You got a diagnosis, you got 1 year, what are you going to do? That's not a purpose question, but the answer might reasonably contain purpose information. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. And so with a company, what's the greatest positive impact this company could possibly have on the world with infinite time and resources? What would we do? That's also not a purpose question per se, but it's very close. And the answer might contain purpose information. So either for an individual purpose or organizational purpose, you just come up with a bunch of those kind of purpose adjacent questions and you ask a lot of those questions of a lot of people. And one of the mistakes CEOs are trying to restrict the number of people involved in the process. No, we want more data, right? Here's the question I ask CEOs. They're like, well, I only want my executive team and just these 8 people. And I'm like, okay, so let's say I'm going to bet you $1 billion. And the bet is that you can throw a dart. And if you hit a bullseye, you get the $1 billion. But you get to have as many people as you want, but each person only gets to throw 1 dart. How many people do you want throwing darts? And the answer is as many as possible.
As many as possible. I was going to say
right.
As many as possible.
As many as possible. So how many people do you want to try to guess what the company's purpose statement is? As many as possible is the correct answer, right? So you get everybody to answer these purpose-adjacent questions to give you as much raw material as possible on the theory that somebody, could be the janitor, could be the, bookkeeper, somebody is going to hit a bullseye. And by the way, there's real stories about the janitor coming up with the company's purpose.
That seemed very specific, so I figured.
It's happened.
It's happened. Yeah.
So
there's also real stories of the janitor telling, was it John F. Kennedy, what he was doing at NASA, putting a man on the moon.
That's right. I'm putting men on the moon. That's a sign of an effective purpose right there. When the person sweeping the floors says, I'm putting a man on the moon, right? That's an effective purpose. So you get all this data. That way, the other way of doing it, which is more effective but harder to do, involves getting at unconscious information. And so now you're doing things like guided visualization and written act imagination.
Are you encouraging hypnosis?
Hypnotherapy is one of them.
Yeah.
So any technique that allows the conscious mind to ask questions of something subconscious or unconscious, and then you pose direct purpose questions. What's the company's purpose? To the unconscious thing, which doesn't have the same vapor lock problem that the conscious mind does. And then you get a whole bunch of data, some of it absolute garbage, and some of it incredibly inspiring and wonderful, right? So either one of those will work. I prefer the latter because it produces more inspiring purpose statements than the former, but it's more work and not everyone's up for the more work. So that's how you get the data.
I am very serious, Tim. I mean, how does one go about that unconscious? That sounds fascinating. I'm sitting here, we're having this conversation, we're talking about purpose. This is something Amanda and I talk about all the time, but all of a sudden I'm like seeing it through a whole nother lens. It's a very interesting little moment I'm having.
So let me add to your moment if I
Yeah.
may. So do you believe, Tim, that you have a purpose whether you're consciously aware of it or not?
Yes, I do.
Okay. That would mean if you want to know your purpose and you don't know your purpose, by definition, it's unconscious.
Okay.
That's what unconscious means.
Yep.
Right? It's true about you, but you don't know it. That's what unconscious means.
Got it.
Which means that some part of your unconscious already knows the answer, even though your conscious mind doesn't. So wouldn't it make sense, if you had its phone number, to dial up that part of the unconscious and say, hey, you know that purpose thing I'm curious about? Would you tell me what it is? And then it says, oh yeah, sure, it's this. And we're done. Now, the tricky part about that is creating the conditions for that to occur. But fundamentally, that's what happens in that particular method, whether it's an individual or an organization. In the organizational case, you get a bunch of people sitting around all doing a guided visualization or something, all asking something from their unconscious what the company's purpose statement is. And some of them fall asleep. Some of them, have some weird dreams. Some of them come back with bad purpose statements. Some of them come back with good ones. But the good ones from that method are better than the good ones from the other method where you're asking perp adjacent questions. Got them thinking now.
You're bringing me back, and I kid you not, this was like a 6th grade theater class. So I went to a middle school that was in the fine arts arena, and literally we had a visualization exercise to like put you into character, and it was lights out. You were on your mat or whatever, and you literally went through this process. I mean, you're literally putting me back in that room.
Right. It's surprisingly effective. It works like 80% of the time. It works really well. Yep.
Yeah.
Now, not all companies are up for that.
Right. True.
It turns out that there's a very specific type of person or company who will prefer and use that method over the usual ones. So those people in organizations are what I call change agents. And a change agent is someone who feels a personal sense of responsibility to create a better world, a personal sense of responsibility. And they often don't like it. Like there's a little voice in their head telling them it's their problem to fix the world. And they keep telling the voice to shut up, and it won't, right? If I were a betting man, I'd bet both of you are change agents. I would bet substantial sums of money. Tim, I'm sure of.
Yeah.
I think Amanda is too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You read it right. Yeah.
Good. Now, there are also change agent organizations. There are companies where it's not just about shaving off a little bit of cost so that we can increase the profit margin a little bit. Some of them are like, we want to transform our market, or we want to change how the world does X or something like that, right? And just making money isn't enough for them. Those people in those organizations strongly prefer the unconscious methods to the conscious methods because they yield so much more information, and that information is so much more specific.
It is fascinating to me that as much as I thought I knew about this topic, I didn't see you at the Purple Summit. So
I would say, yeah.
Amanda did. So give me a little grace. But
I'm very dangerous. I apologize.
It's just fascinating to me that I think to your point, it's been more of my experience has been more of hey, let's get in a room and kick some ideas around and stuff that's recycled. So,
which for most people in most companies will be more than enough. And there's not a problem to be solved there, right? If the company that wants to do a better job for their employees and a better job for their customers and make better products comes up with some short, pithy purpose statement that they got through, just a lot of brainstorming and hard work, and they're inspired by that, that's it. That's a win. We're good. We're done. But a change agent company will be unsatisfied with the results of a process like that.
So you mean that they were sitting at the Purpose Summit going, I think we need to do this again?
I can't tell you how many times I've given a talk and I've had a CEO come up to me afterwards and say, I wish I had met you 5 months ago. We just did da-da-da-da-da-da, and I can't do it again. And
I know. We were literally sitting the last day of the Purpose Summit, and we had several other teammates with us at this one, which was really a unique experience for us to share it with them. And we were having a conversation about what was the one thing we were going to do walking away from it, right? Because there's so much information and what we can gather. And Tim and I looked at each other and we're like, we need to put this, and we follow EOS, so we utilize that. And he's like, this needs to be on our annual agenda, that we need to come back to our purpose statement and ask these questions. And to your point, like I just kept going back to my notes, and I know I showed you my notebook, all the things I was writing down, and in your breakout session. And the thing that just kept sitting with me is that the purpose statement that we have today in our working lives, I was like, I feel like it's middle ground. It's not we're not going to get a really strong negative reaction, and we're not going to get, a really strong positive reaction consistently. And that doesn't sit well with me. I'm like, it needs to feel like powerful and moving. And it's okay. We're not going to be for everybody. And I'm totally fine with that. But I want it to be like elicit a response.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about eliciting a response. So when I work with an organization or an individual and say, okay, so we did a bunch of purpose work and now we have a purpose, and now we're going to see how well did we do. Now, some of how we can tell how well we did because the people who are involved in the process have strong reactions to it. I know we'll talk about that, right? They have strong reactions. They're like, oh, wow, this is great. This is definitely a purpose. I'm like, okay, now we're going to go test it on other people who were not in the room. And I tell them to go say, our purpose is blah, or our mission is blah, or we blah, 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 whatever format they're using. And so now what I tell them to do is say that to 10 people and watch their reactions. And what you want to see is eyebrows up, right? Mouth open. Sometimes a noise, right? Like that. And then a bunch of questions. That's what we're looking for. The person's like, what? How do you do that? Right. And I'm like, Eric, that's what we're going for. Here's what you don't want. So last Tuesday, I was right? Furrowed brows, confused look, change of subject, right? That's bad. The other one's good.
I don't know. I feel like there's so much energy behind it, and it's so much work that you're putting into it. So for those that are, listening along, they might be starting out. They might be in that, well, we've done it 6 times and we need to do it a 7th, or they might be well down the path of, no, this is what it is, but how do we refine how we go about communicating it? I think there's kind of 3 areas that anybody could be in. And this is just really helpful because again, sitting there, like I feel very called, and I know Tim does as well, feel very called to continue to have that purpose discussion. Like it's not this, it's defined, but it doesn't have to be like written in stone. Just because it is the way it has been doesn't mean that you can't revisit that conversation and make it more.
Well, it's recommended to revisit it because what tends to happen is the potency of the purpose will stay the same for a little while and then it'll start to tail off. And that point is usually at about like 2 years or so. So just like you were saying, we recommend that people test the purpose statements annually and expect that after 2 to 3 years, they'll start to decrease in potency. And sometimes a simple wording change will fix it and make it better. You just have to, make it a little more aggressive. And then it's like, okay, now I'm having a reaction again. Or occasionally you have to completely redo it, especially if you've been very aggressive about manifesting your purpose. You will outgrow it and you'll need a more aggressive purpose.
Yeah.
So you talked about, I'll say, good and bad purpose statements, Tim, earlier, other than the obvious, and maybe it's just how people react to it. I mean, how do you discern a good one from a not so good one?
Right. So the good ones are short, simple, and very challenging to achieve. People should be seriously questioning whether it's too much. And if you have some people saying, no, we can't, we're just one little company, we can't change the world in a big way like that, that's a good sign that you've got a good purpose statement on your hands. When people are trying to water it down, it's a keeper. If it sounds too arrogant, it's a keeper. And so one of the biggest mistakes people make is in an effort to try to please everybody, they try to modify the purpose statement until no one has a negative reaction to it. And then what you have will be, limp and weak. at the end. And that's not going to do you any good. It will not do you any good.
That's the one that draws no conviction. It just becomes something on a wall.
It's not going to change anyone's behavior
Yeah.
because you have that purpose statement, right? You need a purpose statement that's going to change people's behavior. And it's only going to change people's behavior if it stimulates a reaction. The stronger the reaction, the better. And this is one that people have a terrible time with. It doesn't matter whether that reaction is positive or negative. So a really, really good purpose statement, roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of the people in the room working on the purpose statement will be like, oh my God, that's it. And the other ones will be like, absolutely not. NFW. We cannot have that as our purpose statement, right? And so that's the one you want to keep, the one that has that response. If everybody hates it, technically it could be a good one, but that's kind of a problem. But much more often, you're going to have like a 50-50 or 70-30 or something like that who love it and hate it. And if you try to incorporate the negative feedback of the ones who dislike it to make it no longer be a problem for them, it will get substantially weaker and not produce the benefit.
So purpose by consensus is not good.
Well, it depends on how you're measuring the consensus. If we're measuring the consensus by the absolute value of the reactions, then it's great.
Consensus meaning everybody has to be okay with it.
No.
Yeah. You said arrogant. Would another word for it to be bold?
Yes.
Okay.
But I particularly like arrogant because that's the feeling people have. That statement is too arrogant for us to put on our website. The people will say that. Or that purpose is too unrealistic. There's no way we can do that. We don't have the capacity, the resources to make that big a change in the world. When people are saying that, that's your winner. Like you're done. When you're getting those reactions, you're there.
Well, and you kind of said it in this way in the workshop. And so I'm paraphrasing, right? It's been a little bit since I was sitting there, but you were like, it's ambitious to the point of arrogance. And I think that's a really good clarifying. Like, so if you are sitting there and it does not feel accomplishable or realistic, then cool.
But wouldn't it be fun to try?
Right. Yeah. Like, I think we could do, like, let's figure this out. And then the other part that really hit for me, and this is giving you a lens into my brain, right, is that you said there should be clear benefits to like the world around you, like how you're impacting.
Clear benefits to somebody other than the organization.
Yes.
Right? So putting our knives in every kitchen in America is not a good purpose statement because that's about our bottom line. Now, we might believe that our knife is better and that everyone will be better off with our knives, but that is not, no, you want like save the whales, feed the starving children, like those kind of things that would normally show up in a nonprofit where it's very obviously about creating a better world and not at all obvious how the organization benefits. And this is for a purpose statement, right? Now, if you're creating strategic goals and stuff, you need to have stuff that's going to improve the bottom line. But that doesn't belong in the purpose statement. The purpose statement has to be why the world is substantially better off because you exist, because of the great stuff you're going to do for everybody else, not for yourself.
So if you're working with, and I'm just thinking, there's lots of different sizes of organizations and people are kind of creating this. If you were to say, I know you kind of said like save the whales or, feed all the children in the world or whatever that looks like, what is an example of maybe an organization you've worked with or something you kind of lean on for a small?
Sure.
Yeah.
Here's a company, it's actually local to me in Berkeley, California, real estate data company. So they supply the raw data that the MLSs, I don't know what that even stands for. Those are the regional...
Multiple listing system. Yeah.
Thank you. The multiple listing systems. So when you want to go on your realtor's website and see which homes are available and take a virtual tour, somebody had to provide all that data. And it wasn't the realtor because the realtors are not techno geeks, right? So they're purchasing a service from someone that allows them to show that stuff on their website. So this is the company that supplies that data. Right? And their purpose statement was to find the right home for everyone, like everyone. And that meant, if you think about it, as a side effect of that, no homelessness. Because if everyone has the right home, it's probably not a tent in the park. Maybe for a small number of people it is, but most of the people don't want to be in the tent in the park. And their message, so I actually create 4 different types of purpose statements. The message statement, which is another type of purpose statement, is connecting people to home and community is a sacred calling. And boy, these are software developers. Boy, did they debate the word sacred. That conversation went on a very long time. And at this point, it should be no surprise how I reacted, which was, oh, we really don't like that one? We really, really don't like that one? Great, we're there. And they're like, but we don't want it in the statement. I was like, great, find another word you react to more strongly and I'll take it out. And they couldn't, so it stayed. And so that, I mean, you can feel that's not like we make software for MLSs to display that. Like that's a completely different level of statement. Both of those, right? Finding the right home for everyone, mission, and then the message, connecting people to home and community is a sacred calling. And that was a message to the brokers and realtors and MLSs, right? To tell them what you're doing. I know it's just your day job, but this makes an enormous difference in human beings' lives. So that's an example of one where, people think, well, we're a trucking company. We can't have a higher purpose. Yes, you can. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You can have an inspiring higher purpose. I would love to work with a tobacco company. Oh my God. I did work with a coal company CEO and a company that sold valves to the oil and gas industry. They had a great purpose.
That's an important business. A curious question, Tim. How does faith play into, or does it play into the construct of a really good purpose?
That's a fantastic, highly technical question, and I love it. And the answer is it depends on who you're talking to. So I'm going to grossly overgeneralize and say that there are very religious people. There are spiritual people who aren't necessarily affiliated with any particular religion. They might be. And then there's people who really don't believe in any of that hoo-ha. Okay. So let's deal with this grossly overgeneralized three groups.
But yeah, a spectrum of...
Right. So the religious ones, finding purpose is a religious exercise. It has to be, otherwise it doesn't count. If I'm an evangelical Christian, like the people at the Purpose Summit, who run the Purpose Summit, then purpose equals God's plan for me. That's what that word means. And any other definition of it will be uninteresting and useless to me. But if I'm the one who doesn't believe in all that hoo-ha, that definition does not work for me at all. So the question is it a religious exercise? Is it a spiritual exercise? Or is it a psychological exercise? Depends on which group you're in. And you should stick to your turf and don't be confused by what the other people are doing. And I've had, in boardrooms where we've got, evangelical Christians sitting next to New Age Californians, sitting next to Hindus, sitting next to atheists, and doing fine because everybody's operating inside their own belief system and other people are doing something different, and that's not my problem. And I'm getting the purpose information from the source I want to get it from that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because when you said, technology company has sacred in the statement and the strong reaction, that's what kind of got me. I was like, because sacred could mean different things to different people.
Could mean different things to different people. And all those definitions are potentially meaningful and applicable, depending on who the listener is, right? People are fine doing very, very deep, very spiritual, sometimes religious purpose work in the workplace, as long as no one is telling them what they personally should believe, right? As long as they get to stick to their own beliefs and other people get to stick to theirs, everybody's fine.
It would come down, right, to honoring the person that's at the table and the fact that what I believe is not what you have to believe, but we can come together in a sense of community to deliver on how we're impacting the greater world.
So we're all doing our own individual exercise that produces some sort of raw purpose data, and all that raw purpose data gets treated the same, regardless of where it came from. Because we don't care where it came from. We don't care whether you thought it up, whether you had it in a dream last night, whether God told it to you, or whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is when we take all that data and test it, what's the good stuff? What's the stuff that makes people get excited and cringe? That's what we're looking for.
Well, and you said earlier, right, you want as many people as possible to try to hit that bullseye or to even to test out when you come to the place where you think you have a purpose statement that you want to move forward with. You have a very mathematical way in which you go about that. And you mentioned that a little bit in your breakout at the Purpose Summit of like, what is that average? How do you get to...
That's right. This is where the math degree comes in briefly.
Yeah, like where does that play? I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, okay, so where's the mathematical science behind this?
So the mathematical part is that generally speaking, the purpose statement that generates the strongest reactions is the winner.
Okay.
And choosing a weaker one over a stronger one is almost always a bad idea. There are other tests, but that's like the fastest, most accurate test is that one. And it's easiest to use in groups. So now let's say we have 10 people in the room, and they might be a company of 10 people, or they could be 10 people in a company of 1,000 people. But we have 10 people who are actually in the room testing purpose statements. We've already got all our raw data. Now we've got this big, long list of purpose statements, and we're going to go through and see if any of these are any good. We do not debate purpose statements. You can debate purpose statements for a year and get nowhere. It does not matter what people's opinions about the purpose statements are or anything like that. Each one gets tested, and the test looks like this. Everybody reads the purpose statement out loud, and then they vote the strength of their physical and emotional reactions. Not how much they liked it, not whether they think it's true or not. Those are thoughts. Physical and emotional reactions. Happy, sad, angry, cold, hot, right? Those are like afraid. Those are physical and emotional reactions. On a scale of +5 to -5, +5, really good, strong, positive physical and emotional reactions. -5, really bad, negative physical and emotional reactions. And anywhere in between. 0 would be nothing. I didn't feel anything when I said that. Take all the numbers, take the absolute value, meaning take away the sign, and then average them all. So the average of +4 and -4 is not 0, it's 4.
It's 4.
Yeah.
In this math, right? And what you want is you want a statement on a scale of 5 that gets an average of at least a 4. That's strong enough to declare a winner.
That is fascinating.
It seems so simple and also really hard at the same time, right?
People argue. They don't like that negative reactions count. They'll start to lie about their negative reactions. There's all sorts of things that go on, right?
Yeah.
That make it difficult. But that's fundamentally what you want to do. You want people to encourage people to be intellectually honest about their reactions, and strongest reaction wins.
Do you encourage, and I know we didn't really talk about this so much in the session that I sat in, but do you encourage that you have an organization that might be going through this, have a facilitator like you, just have somebody that...
Very difficult to self-facilitate.
Yeah, right? Like it's as I like to say, like an interested third party, like somebody at least knows something about you and cares that you get to a really strong purpose, but isn't invested as much as like CEO.
Well, it's interesting. It's sometimes, so it's very hard for the CEO to run the process because the CEO is going to have strong opinions about which one's better. And it's going to have a natural impulse to try to enforce those opinions. It's very hard to switch that off.
Well, and kind of get people trying to figure out what they want and line up with that.
That's right. And people don't want to go against the CEO. Sometimes, like some CEOs will sit in the back row so no one can see them vote, stuff like that. So I had one who left. That was interesting. He left and went to a bar and said, "Let me know when we're done." It worked really well, actually. So you don't want the CEO trying to influence votes consciously or unconscious, because just people seeing the CEO vote can be enough influence to cause problem. So you need someone who's facilitating, who's going to rigorously apply the principles of the process I've been describing, right? That every statement gets its own vote with no debate. And then if you don't like the statement, put another one on the list and we'll vote on that one, right? Modify it, create a new one. But we're not debating individual statements. We're just voting on them. And then we can add more and vote on those too. And pretty quickly, the list of ones that are worthy of paying attention to gets very short. Most of the statements will score very poorly, and a small number will score well. And now we've got 3 or 4 or 5, and we're trying to play with the wording to see how we can get the maximum reaction out of these statements, right? That's what happens. And you want someone who's trustworthy to be true to the principles of the process and not try to influence the process. And usually that means someone who's not a stakeholder, to your point, Amanda. Now, sometimes I participate in purpose work with organizations in which I am a stakeholder. I'm a client or a shareholder or something in that organization. And then I'll ask their permission, do you want me to vote or not? And if they say no, I don't vote. And if they say yes, I vote, and I treat my vote exactly the same as everybody else's.
Well, Tim, you are doing an exercise in a company, and you made it clear there's a strong reaction, positive or negative. What's it like when you have, I don't know, 70% of the people having a strong reaction and 30% having an equally negative reaction? Understand the math.
That's great. I'm a happy facilitator at that point.
But I mean, this is kind of a strange question. I mean, obviously you got 70% of the room pretty fired up about it. Like, yeah, this is it. And you got 30%.
And 30% are like, no, you can't make us.
Yeah.
Right.
How's that end up? I'm just curious.
Well, what happens is at some point people realize that the negative votes are counting, and they're like, and they ask, why is that? And I say, because accurate purpose statements generate strong reactions, and those reactions aren't always positive. Accurate purpose statements are intimidating, and being intimidated is a negative reaction. And people are like, okay, I kind of get that. And what I'll do is I'll test something on them. Like I'll say, okay, so Tim, I'm going to say this to you. Say, my mission in life is to be the best piano player in the world.
My mission in life is to be the best piano player in the world.
Good. Do you feel any reaction to that statement? Any negative reaction, intimidation, or anything?
I don't play the piano, so I got a long way to go.
That's not an answer to my question. What kind of reaction did you have?
Nothing. It was blasé, no reaction.
Blasé, completely flatline, right? But that's a very intimidating, difficult purpose to manifest. Why weren't you intimidated by that, Tim?
Because I don't play the piano, so...
It's got nothing to do with you.
And how do we gauge that I'm the best in the world? Yeah.
Right, because you don't care about it at all. This is the thing, right? Which is the fact that it's a challenging purpose statement isn't enough to cause a negative reaction.
Correct. Or positive.
It has to be a challenging purpose statement that has something to do with you in order to cause a negative reaction. And when people get that, they're like, oh, okay, all right. I think now I got it, right? It's not intimidating unless it's yours.
True.
So, Tim Flanagan, to your point, so if you're sitting there, right, and there's 70% that are like fired up about it, there's 30% that have a strong reaction in the opposite direction, like that's really good to be like, okay, so you decide that this is the strongest that we have. This is the option A is what we're going with. And everybody's sitting at that table. How do you...
So I tell them, I say, you can get rid of this purpose statement. You can make this one go away by coming up with a different purpose statement that people have a stronger reaction to.
Equal to or stronger reaction than this one.
Stronger. So if you can come up with one that's stronger, this one's gone. It's toast. And then they'll try to come up with one that's stronger, but usually they won't because they're afraid of the purpose statement. Their suggestions will be weaker, typically. But occasionally they will come up with a strong one. I'm like, congratulations, you come up with a stronger one. Now this one goes away, just like I said, right? But the watering down the purpose statement to make you more comfortable doesn't serve the organization.
So if you get to that point and like it's 70-30, but this is the one we're going with, there's not a better option that anybody can come up with, a stronger option, not a better, a stronger option that anybody can come up with, and everybody is now going to leave that room. What advice or guidance do you give?
Now remember, I'm the consultant. I can't control what happens after I go home. So those people might raid the CEO's office and convince him or her to switch the purpose statement, right? Such things have happened. That happened at Adobe, actually. So we didn't raid the CEO's office. It was the strategy team watered down the purpose statement that the whole organization had come
Interesting.
up with.
Which I have to imagine happens a lot more often than not.
That was kind of where I was going with.
And usually we'll never know because it all happens behind closed doors.
But is there any like, this sounds a weird way to say it, but like parting advice that you give? Like, okay, cool. We spent all of this time.
I do. Well, what happened? I can tell you what happens, which is people actually, given a little time, will come to understand, left to their own devices, that is, in fact, actually the company's purpose statement, right? They might not be happy about it, but after they think about it for a couple of days, they'll be like, you know what? I hate to admit it, but I kind of think that's right. And part of what happens naturally at that stage, when we get that one that everyone has a very strong reaction to it, usually an argument breaks out about how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's another sign that we've got the purpose, that people stop debating about what the purpose is and start debating about how to manifest it. And I'm like, okay, there, we won. See what happened right there? See how the conversation just changed? Now we started arguing about how to manifest. Doesn't always happen, but sometimes it happens. And that's a sign that we've got it, because people won't argue about how to manifest a purpose that's not their purpose.
Yeah.
But do you see people that are, have a strong negative reaction to it?
Well, they're arguing about how difficult it's going to be to manifest. That's their argument.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it, is that's really what they're arguing about, not that they don't necessarily care for it. It's like, that's too hard. We can't do that, which is a different mindset issue. Yeah.
Right. And my answer is, well, we can't do that now, but what kind of company would we have to become in order to be able to pull that off? Which gets into a whole other conversation we can have another time about vision.
Well, I think it gets down to, Tim, the fact that if it's seemingly that hard, it's that aspirational and
likely that inspiring.
Correct. It's not a layup. It's not, blah.
If it's a layup, it won't be inspiring. If people can easily figure out how to make it happen, it will inspire no one.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put, the strength.
Yeah. When I'm thinking about like the action that goes like next, right? So you have this purpose statement that you've attuned and you're like moving forward with, and it's that drive. And you have, let's just say, a business decision to make, and you have your strategy, and all those things have been done, right? But you have a business decision to make, and sometimes there is a purposeful choice and a maybe not so purposeful choice. Like, what is your advice in that scenario when you kind of feel like you're between the brick wall and the boulder?
So that's a really good question, because the most important thing you could do with the purpose is use it in decision making. So that the next day and the day after and the day after, they have to say, okay, do we want to open up in this new market or not? Do we want to close down this product line or keep trying to revive it? Like, in each case, you ask, well, given our purpose, what's the more purposeful choice? People get confused and think they're supposed to do the purposeful one, and that's not right. What they're supposed to do is consider the purpose every time and allow it to be a factor among many, influencing whether we do it or not.
Not the only.
Rarely does the company have the luxury to always only do the purposeful thing. That would be lovely. But it's like, well, this client's not really purposeful for us, but they account for 60% of our revenue. Let's keep them around for a little while longer, right? So
the practical side of purpose. Yeah.
And that's the right answer, right? Until you can afford to let that client go, because you've got so much more purposeful business that you can't stand it, right? Until you're in that position, you can't threaten the survival of the company by firing a non-purposeful client who accounts for 60% of your business. The company won't be around long enough to manifest its purpose if you make moves like that. So the mistake people make in that situation is they try to spin it as if that's the purposeful choice. And that is the wrong move. People are not stupid. They will hear you spinning it. They will see you trying to put the lipstick on the pig. And they're going to be like, and then you lose credibility.
And purpose loses credibility.
Right. So it would be lovely if we could say no to this client because it's not super purposeful. Now we know that we should be doing this and not that. But let's be honest. I'm attached to my check. Do you like my paycheck? Do you like yours? We absolutely need to do this. And let's all be really grateful to the people who are going to keep working with this client instead of doing this other stuff because they're paying all of our bills. Will everyone please thank them and give them a round of applause, right? So that it's super clear what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that it's not purposeful and that it's still the right choice. Now, if you choose the non-purposeful one every time, you're not going to get anywhere, right? But if you consider it every time, sometimes you get to do the purposeful thing and sometimes you don't. And if you get to do it enough times, it's going to slowly move the company in that direction, which is exactly what should happen.
And is that where you're seeing like behavior and culture being like enveloped and driven by the purpose? Is that what you would say? Like it's work, like, aha, this is working. Or like, what are some of those things we should be looking for to say, no, this really needs?
Well, what happens is people feel more fulfilled doing stuff that's purposeful than stuff that's not. And so in business, I mean, it seems so obvious, right? But in business, basically what we've set up is an environment where we're bribing people to do stuff that they'd really rather not do in exchange for money that they need. That's the fundamental contract between organizations and employees, right? And that's how economists model it, right? We're all utility maximizing functions that are trying to avoid work and maximize leisure, according to the traditional economists. And the assumption is no one would want to work if they didn't have to. Well, I challenge that assumption, right? Purpose-driven people like to work. If they're doing purpose-driven work, right, they prefer that to sitting around on their butts because they're deriving meaning and fulfillment from the work that they're doing, right? That janitor who's saying, I'm putting a man on the moon, is feeling good about mopping that floor and would feel less good about mopping a different floor. And so that's why you get these, 70-something% employee engagement in purpose-driven companies and 20-something% or 30-something% in typical ones. That's a huge competitive advantage. So people get paid in money and meaning. They get 2 paychecks instead of 1. And that's why you get thousands of people competing for one underpaid job at a nonprofit, where all of them could earn more money out in the for-profit industry.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, it's a good perspective, right? Because you sit there and you think about, it's so true to see those people, especially if you do any type of volunteer work or you go into those organizations and you see that person and you're like, wow, they're so passionate about what they're doing and they have talent that you could mold in a different way. They could, and you don't want to take away their light.
Right. You could put them somewhere else so they'd make more money and be miserable.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. It's something to think about for certain.
Yes, it is. What I say to the CEOs is say, why do you want the nonprofits to have all the highly motivated people who just aren't in it for the money, right? They're not only in it for the money. Why don't you want your employees to behave the same? I have volunteers who volunteer time in my for-profit company. How many for-profit companies can say that they have volunteers who show up consistently and volunteer time and effort for the company?
Not a lot that I'm aware of.
I was going to say.
I had to think about that for a minute.
I know, how do you quantify?
Is that a thing, right?
Yeah.
The brain kind of,
Yeah.
This is a little bit.
Yeah.
So interesting. So if you were sitting across from someone who had never heard you speak, has not read your book, True Purpose, has never, engaged with you in any way, and they come up to you and they say, I'm trying to write a personal purpose statement. And they have the option of doing the 2 options that you said, right? So they can do the conscious.
So first question, are you a change agent? Right? Because that's going to tell us which method to use.
So you answer that question, and let's just say that the answer is no. Let's just say, what are the 3 questions that you would then tell them to go? And I know they might be purpose adjacent, but what are the 3 questions you're going to tell them to go and ask?
What would you do if you had a year to live? What would you do if you won the lottery? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And there are lots of others.
Certainly. But I'm just if somebody is sitting there and they're
those are 3 really good ones.
Yeah, I want to go that route.
And rate at length in response to each of those 3 questions.
And then would you recommend that they have, if they're doing it on a personal level instead of at a company or a team level, they have a personal board of directors that they go and...
So you should have at least one other person involved in the process. People generally can't be trusted to do their own purpose work because they will avoid the uncomfortable stuff without even thinking about it. They'll just naturally eliminate it. Right. And so now you sit down with your friend or your spouse or your coach or somebody like that and say, look through here and what's all the stuff that really might be, a purpose. It might be something, a mission or something I might do. And just with that person, pick out every sentence or sentence fragment that has to do with helping other people or making a better world or whatever, and write them all down. And you put down in front of each one, my purpose is to blah, 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 right? In front of each one. And then they read each one out loud, +5, -5. Which one really makes you cringe?
And then take the absolute of that. Okay. Well, that's good.
Which one's ambitious to the point of arrogance? As you correctly quoted, with that one.
That's
that one
it.
there. The one that you're like, no, not that one. Right? That one.
Well, Tim Flanagan, I saw you writing a lot of notes as we were having this.
I don't normally write notes in podcasts either, FYI.
This is true. But I've had the benefit, Tim Kelley, of spending time with you. And so I just am so appreciative that you were willing to come on and share some of this knowledge and give that mathematical lens to it. Because there's an art to it, but there's also that like very practical, like how do you know if it's strong or not, which I really took away. Tim, anything that you felt as we're kind of closing out today?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say thank you, Tim, for your time today. I think it's super thought-provoking conversation. This is not your run-of-the-mill, do this, it's, again, this is a topic I feel relatively familiar with, and you've given me a lot to think about personally today. So that means a lot to me, and I think it'll mean a lot to our listeners. Amanda, I think it'd be helpful for our listeners to be able to connect with Tim. So maybe what's the best way to do that, Tim? Because clearly doing this work the way I think most companies or individuals approach it, which is on their own, convinced today is not a great way to go. So what's the best way for people to connect with you and knowing that this is your purpose to help other people figure theirs out?
Well, if they're like a consultant or a coach or a therapist or a pastor or something like that, and they want to get trained, the best place to go is truepurposeinstitute.com, because we train people to do this work with their clients. If they want to work with me to find their purpose or their company's purpose, then it would be newparadigmgloballeader.com, newparadigmgloballeader.
Okay. And we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Or unless my new purpose venture, by the way, is canceledleader.com. My purpose has guided me to work with people who've been canceled by cancel culture.
Interesting.
Well, that's a niche.
Canceledleader.com. Isn't that a
growing niche, I might add.
Great.
It's a growing niche.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, good. Well, Tim, thank you so much again for being with us. It was a pleasure to get to spend time with you, not only at the Purpose Summit, but also on the podcast today. 100% sure that our paths will cross again.
Good. And I have to say, you guys asked a lot of thought-provoking questions that demonstrate what you were saying, Tim, which is that this is not your first barbecue, right? You guys have really worked and talked around this issue personally and organizationally for a while to be able to ask the questions that you did. So I commend you for
thanks.
that.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Winning Through Culture.
Until next time, stay intentional, be impactful,
Because your culture matters.